Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we're returning to the subject of Synology DSM Disk Station Manager version 7.4. 7.4 has been made available as a release candidate, well, now. And if you do want to upgrade your Synology NAS to the latest version of DSM, this video may well be for you. I'm going to talk about what is included, what isn't included, what's added, what's being removed, and ultimately whether an upgrade to DSM 7.4 right now is something you should do or kick down the road a little bit. A quick before your information FYI here at the start of the video. Number one, if unless you really just want to try out some of the AI stuff, I wouldn't recommend upgrading it right now, largely because there's just no need. Whenever DSM versions roll out, we can go back to DSM 7.3, for example, there's always little odd eccentricities and little bridges and little blips and blobs and things that happen. So if I was you, whether it is you're running a completely clean Synology system with Synology drives, running Synology Eco, or you're running a slightly shaky one that may be utilising patched little workarounds and stuff, or maybe just not even using Synology drives, any of that kind of situation, I would give it at least a month, 3 at best, before you consider upgrading to 7.4. But you even have access. DSM 7.4 isn't available for everyone. Now, I'm going to circle back to some coverage of the original DSM 4 launch during Computex 2026, both here on the channel and across multiple editorial outlets, and an error that occurred there to do with which systems could upgrade to 7.4. And the majority of us said devices after 2021 were the only ones that could enjoy 7.4. However, that wasn't true. And one of the reasons that was true was due to how information was being delivered by the brand. Now, to be specific, the part of DSM 7.4 that is limited to later generation devices, 2021-2022 series devices, and it is detailed, if not on screen, then in the link below. These devices are the ones that can take advantage of the storage efficiency benefits that are being baked into the storage manager in DSM 7.4. And we'll get back to that later on in a few demos later in this video. But that information was the only specification information that was delivered from Synology, and as it was such a key component in DSM 7.4, alongside DSM AI Agent and I think the cluster manager stuff as well, the result was that the majority of us did assume that such a key feature to DSM 7.4 and a compatibility listing for that was the overarching list of fully compatible devices. Now, about a week after pretty much all of the coverage of 7.4 after Computex went out, Synology suddenly realised that the messaging hadn't been that clear, and then circled around, and you'll see lots of corrections online that in fact some devices as old as 2016 series can enjoy DSM 7.4. As a rule of thumb, if your device already can support DSM 7.3, you can get DSM 7.4. The oldest device I could find was the DS116, a little one bay running on a remarkably mediocre ARM processor. Now, realistically, I don't have a DS116 here, but I very much doubt it's going to enjoy the majority of the benefits of 7.4. But at the very least, it will take advantage of the security benefits, the vulnerabilities, the fixes, the performance fixes, anything like that. So again, if you are wondering if you can get access to it, if your device rolled out after 2016, chances are you can get 7.4. Next up, this is more of a repetition of what we always say, but for those that are new to this, you can't downgrade, at least not easily. If you do upgrade from DSM 7.3 to DSM 7.4, you won't be able to just switch a switch back. Now, that isn't a completely hard and fast rule. You can SSH into the system and muck around in the background, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can brick your system very easily. But just generally as a rule of thumb, just treat this as a roll into DSM 7.4 is a no return policy. Next up, keep in mind if you are using MailStation or Synology Mail Server, these will be ceased as soon as you end DSM 7.3 and go into DSM 7.4, and they even make you actually agree to it during the upgrade process there. Now, a lot of that has to do with the consolidation into Synology's Mail Plus application and consolidating a lot of the efforts, from what I can see there. So just keep in mind if you are using those, much like DSM 7 when we went from DSM 6 into 7, and Synology Moments and Synology Photo Station got merged into Photos. This is not unlike that, but do keep that in mind, particularly if you're used to those ecos in these more legacy applications. And finally, this is a big one because we are going to talk about storage efficiency shortly. Arguably, I would say in the current climate, one of the more important apps and services to the casual storage user. But Synology's storage efficiency application not only is only applicable to devices after the 2021-2022 series, and there is wiggle there, they state it as 2022. I will say, it appears you can only do it with Synology Media. That's right. Now, I'm testing on a DS925 Plus with Synology hard drives and Synology SSDs. But when I did run the update, I was contacted by another user. Again, thank you so much, Dan. I'll link to you below, or at least put your name on screen, or the image you sent me at the very least. And that showed that if you're not rocking a Synology hard drive in your system, and obviously across a RAID pool, you weren't able to take advantage of this service. Now, I wouldn't mind so much because it's not the first time we've seen Synology do this. And they're, devil's advocate, their platform does need to be supported and funded. My beef with this is they promoted this at their event saying that they were aware of storage hard drive costs, of frequency and inability to grab SSDs these days, and did this whole spiel during their presentation that their storage efficiency, part of the logic and the reason behind it for them was that they could understand that people were having difficulty obtaining storage media in the current climate for their systems, allowing people to extend the utility of their existing storage systems. However, only allowing it to be used after 2021-2022 devices already limits the number of users that can take advantage of it, and then only locking it behind your own drives that you've been supplying since 2021? It's not the longest amount of time, and it's a smaller contingent of the overall user base that will enjoy the benefits of, the compression and the deduplication in post-process here. So that really rubbed me up the wrong way, that they're only allowing this to be used on their own storage media. I'd love to know what their justification for that is, but still, let's press on with actual DSM 7.4. Right, so here I am on the desktop here of my DS925 Plus. We go into the control panel, go into the information center. As you can see, we are now rocking DSM 7.4. And like a lot of the minor, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 updates of DSM, you're not really going to immediately see the difference there. You have to kind of dig around for them. As mentioned, the initial difference that I was probably the most excited for to be more universally available is to do with that storage efficiency. Storage efficiency there, you can see you can set the time management, the reclamation schedule, so when space is going to be reclaimed, and you can set it for different times. Again, pause it. This is a post-production process, so by default, I believe, it was set by reclamation being off during the case of the middle of the working day. But again, you can set it to however you like. Just bear in mind, you are going to see resource utilization there go up quite significantly during those times. And that's really it in terms of the setting for both of the storage efficiency tasks. And again, you can learn more about them by opening them out in their own separate tabs. And I go into a decent amount of detail on these pages. From there, it's a case of enabling the historical settings. From there, go into the volume that you've got. Again, whether you've got cache or not shouldn't make too much of a difference. But from there, you can go down to the bottom right setting, as you can see here, and then you can configure the storage settings. But keep in mind, clicking settings, that you will need to enable the usage details analysis. You'll need to make sure that is enabled. So if you have disabled that previously, you have to go back in and re-enable that. Doing so will allow you to go into the Storage Efficiency Manager and then start choosing where you want these features and advantages to be taken care of. Compression, I know it's pretty self-explanatory. Compression is data being reduced in scale, and that is something that can be unpacked when it is needed later on. Again, higher ZFS systems, and indeed some elements of more powerful Synology systems allow you to do this in line to a degree, but this once again is post-process. This is after the write. Deduplication is when, and they do actually do a very nice graphic about this. Deduplication is ultimately when you've got the same data in multiple places, such as virtual machines, if you've got multiple backups from different systems, and they find the same data generally scaling quite dramatically depending on the size of your own storage array, and then just keeping one copy and then keeping an index of the original. Once you compress that, or just go with deduplication on its own, you will see benefits. And of course, you can run both of them, but do bear in mind there will be resource utilization and it goes along with certain kinds of files just simply cannot be used in this fashion. Now on that, once we go ahead and say, for example, enable across all of these folders, some of them you're not going to want to use. For example, anything to do with your backup ops, I would not include that. Again, your cold stuff may be. And of course, you can set up a setting here that allows this to be effective on all shared folders moving forward. Again, do keep in mind that when you are using this service, you can't use it on some storage areas, or at least not see the benefits on some protected or mission critical data, such as surveillance data, encrypted data, and stuff like that. And again, there is an extensive list available online. And as long as you're during a time period you set up on that schedule for compression and deduplication to take place, you'll start to see the inherent benefits there, and it does detail the savings over time there. And again, we'll be returning to this later on to just see what the benefits these have been. But if you do head over to the evaluation pages from Synology, you can find out just a little bit more guidance on the kinds of files and folders and storage structure that will see benefits with a lot of the compression. But again, some of the more mission critical stuff there, or some of the more extra layered stuff, is just not going to see it. It's what they class as unsuitable workloads. And I personally wouldn't enable them on that anyway, just in case something goes wrong, or at least during this early release candidate stage there. But as already covered, you can only do this using Synology storage media. I'm already using some Synology drives inside this Synology system. I didn't have time while I've got a job to go to in about 3 hours to put in some third-party drives to see if there's any inherent benefits, but I'm going to trust Dan's message in that it does look like you're not going to be able to utilize this feature with third-party drives currently. So whilst the storage efficiency was running on that primary pool comprised of Synology drives, I just got a bee in my bonnet about this whole not supporting third-party drives, and then it was just secretly I was kind of hoping that I was wrong, and maybe I'll turn out to be wrong down the road, and if I am, I'll happily, cut this out of the video, kill the video, put it in the comments, whatever, publish a retraction. But I've added a Seagate SSD in one of the pools there. I go into the settings menu. I've got usage detail analysis enabled. I want to go into configure storage efficiency. Boom, there's the same message Dan was getting. Storage efficiency is not supported on this volume. Ensure your storage pool is comprised entirely of Synology SSDs. And that's the thing that concerns me. This idea that you need to use their drives to do this does really kind of weaken the whole argument about this being about sustainability. That said, I do think the whole storage efficiency thing is a good thing. I just wish they weren't going to lock this behind their own storage media or more modern systems. Again, hopefully I'm wrong on this, but it's looking increasingly like that's the case. Hopefully anyone, Dave Russell, can work something out for everyone there in the background unofficially. If you are watching this, Dave, or Dave, send in the link. I'd be interested to see how things pan out. But for now, I'm just going to cancel this because I am going to be doing other stuff here in the background as we talk about the other thing that's rolling out with DSM 7.4 that's quite notable, and that is in the package center, DSM Agent. DSM Agent, I'm now setting this up for the first time with you. This is something I've already seen in progress in a few other places. This is allowing you to take advantage of AI agents. Now, again, I'm glad it's optional. I'm really glad it's there, optional in the background, and there you go. That's DSM Agent there. So what this is asking Synology themselves. So you've got on-screen awareness here in the background. Now that is quite interesting because that is if you're asking questions with reference and indicative of the usage of DSM there in the background. The hope is that that on-screen awareness will then aid the answer you get, the very unique answer you get, rather than, going into the help settings and getting predetermined, prefixed answers. Don't get me wrong, there's almost certainly going to be some of this, but at the very least, it's nice to know you're going to have a more personalized solution. Now, it is worth highlighting that Synology was pretty clear during their Computex presentation with regards to the AI agent or DSM agent that what you are utilizing here in its first iteration is more of an assistant in the earliest sense. It can give you guidance and give you a kind of native tips. It also has that screen awareness that we've discussed, but you can't issue widespread instructions. So for example, in the background there, when I've asked if I want to create a new user, it will only allow me to guide me through it. So for example, if I went to the base level top menu here, so here we are, we're going to go straight to DSM Agent. Maybe I would want to create a new shared folder, just a new shared, so create a new shared folder. Now, If the agent had full-on control, it would make its way through the offerings to create that. However, in this early iteration of DSM Agent, what it's doing is guiding you on how to do it. So for example, it's asking me to go into the control panel. So if I open it up and I leave control panel open and I go for a contextual option, so I'll say, what do I do next? It should understand that I've got the control panel open, and therefore it will tailor the information and the guidance it's going to give me in line with the fact that the control panel is currently open. The other thing I will highlight while it's doing this, so it says you're currently in control panel, so you can see it's got that contextual option there. Now, that's really it at the moment, and I know that seems very light, but if I can ask it specific questions. So how much storage space do I have left? If I, not to make a typo, or maybe I should have left that in, there's some questions that there does seem to be relevant information obtained. So while it loads up that one there, it'll tell me just how to check my spare space. But earlier on, when I asked it some questions about my storage, I asked about the storage capacity when I had the storage manager open, which arguably isn't that helpful. Let's be honest, if I had the storage manager open anyway, then I probably could have done it. Right now, DSM Agent is in quite an early stage. Now, to their credit, I've got to give them a huge amount of credit for this. I did not have to link this with an open AI or Google Gemini account. But at the very least, I do think this is quite a nice native assistance tool. It's just right now, this is not to me a full AI agent, given some of the ones that we've looked at recently and the benefits they bring. Still nonetheless, if I didn't know what I was doing with a NAS and I wanted to ask, I want to set up a new account for my daughter, but want it to only access media files, nothing for work. There's a lot of context there to do this, to understand. So there's going to be the basic template stuff. It's going to direct me almost certainly to go into the control panel. It's going to direct me to go into users and set read-only access to certain files and folders. And there it is. It's doing it there in front of us. But still, I think the next step is going to be asking it to do it. At the very least, you've got those contextual openings there that it can do and open things up in the windows. But DSM Agent right now is still feeling just a little bit light, more like a very, very scaled up help tool rather than a true assistant. During the presentation during Copytext, we saw the brand showing off a lot of bells and whistles of it being used to create accounts, destroy accounts, get alerts. And I think that's where the ultimate goal of DSM Agent is going to be. But I guess the big takeaway I'm saying here is for DSM Agent, at least in its current form, is that DSM Agent right now is not worth upgrading to 7.4 at the moment. Now, something else I touched on at one point is to do with some of the apps and services coming later on. Now, if you go into the main heading pages of DSM 7.4, you do find out that some bells and whistles, such as the AI search tool, the Chat Plus tool, the Meet app, that is the video conferencing tool, won't be available until Q4. So that is October till December of this year. Of those three, I am gutted this one isn't available right now. That, I would argue, is significantly more useful than the likes of DSM Agent in its current form. Later variations of DSM Agent, if they continue doing it the way they're going to, I can get behind, but not DSM Agent in its current form without the inclusion of that search tool, something that they were keen to show off both at their booth here on Computex and during their own private PR event. And carrying on slightly on the subject of AI stuff, it is worth highlighting, and it was in the release notes there, you may have caught it, that there is also additional resources put towards monitoring the GPU information in the information center there. And the majority of Synology NASes do not include any kind of high-end graphics card, but some of them have integrated graphics there. So why don't we just take a little look and see in the information center whether that is available, because this CPU doesn't have integrated graphics, so of course there isn't there, but I was hoping to see at least a field that would tell me otherwise. But when it comes to AI utilization, there is of course the AI console tool. And for those that are going to take advantage of third-party APIs like the ones I covered earlier on, then of course you can add in that de-identification tools there to make sure some information, or very specific information for that matter, doesn't make it and get circulated by the AI, as well as what tools are going to be able to access the AI services there. But again, although AI integration in the Synology Office platform and some of the mail composition services are already there, the baseline AI stuff that was already covered in that update we just talked about there, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer. And just another reason why I'm just not really recommending an upgrade towards DSM 7.4 at this time. For most users, these two services here make up the meat and potatoes of DSM 7.4. And storage efficiency, as good as it is, the fact that I can't use third-party drives, or at least until I'm proven otherwise, isn't great for me. And DSM Agent, I think it is going to be good. I have got real high hopes for DSM Agent. But right now, even slightly, I wouldn't even call it complicated questions, but I would say useful questions. For example, asking the system how and when the system has been accessed over the last 24 hours, it's not able to give me access log details. Now, maybe that's because the DSM AI agent hasn't been granted that access to start with. But even if, for example, let's open up the log center for that contextual information that we've talked about there, and I just ask it the same question again, just to see if that makes any difference. I do think this is kind of the tail wagging the dog in a way, insofar as the contextual information is really, really useful. I just want that information to go a little deeper. If you're going to go down the road of integrating DSM agents, you've got to give it a modicum of control, because people that are going to use this, as long as you slap the right TNC at the beginning, they may well want to take advantage of it. They've done the right thing by not forcing it on everyone. They've done the right thing by ensuring it's not a baseline default application that you're expected to turn off. But still, nonetheless, I think this could be done at least a little bit better, or this should have been rolled out alongside those other apps and services in Q4, given that that's what the brand is saying those apps need in the oven a bit longer. And that doesn't even get into the fact that if DSM Agent is an optional application to install, that means that a lot of users may well be setting up their narratives for the first time, not realizing that this is an option to help them along the way. Again, I understand it's catch-22, but it's just another example of how an agent in the AI sense is a tricky thing to get right, especially in personal NAS, when you are taking your data offline to be using a service largely associated normally with online services. But that's really it. When you head back into the release notes there, everything else that's been added to it, you could argue, is fairly low rent in terms of the bells and whistles. Again, compatibility changes to apps and services so they can be used better with other bells and whistles. The removal of legacy applications and services, understandable, although I do think one of these might rub people up the wrong way. Again, some of the improvements towards LDAP server and some of the other stuff there in the background with existing systems, and the integration of GPU information is a long-term change. Again, some of the certificates, some of all of this isn't too bad, but it's a very minor upgrade. And I would argue some of these could have been shoved into a sub update, such as DSM 7.3 point whatever, rather than going into 0.4. The fixes, I would have said, look how long those fixes are compared to everything else. DSM 7.4 doesn't feel like there's a lot of meat on the bone there, and we'll return to this later on. Ultimately, it feels stable. The things that can be effective are purely optional, and if you do have Synology drives at the very least, I really like the storage efficiency tool. I'm just not in love with this idea, and again, please let me be wrong, that you can't use third-party drives to get the job done. But there you go, that is DSM 7.4 right now. Hopefully later this year, when some of the Q4 benefits and the chat plus and the Meet application there, as well as the AI searching, that's where there are tangible benefits of AI, I think, for some users, particularly when you kind of merge it into that DSM AI agent stuff as well. I think that's where those that are seeking AI on their storage will really enjoy the benefits of it. And as long as it remains optional, you know, it's not too bad a thing. I will state that DSM 7.4 is rollout right now. It doesn't feel very meaty as an upgrade. And just like I said in the introduction, Unless you're desperate to try these things out, I'd give it a miss for now, or at least for the next 3 to 4 months, and just keep rocking DSM 7.3 and the security updates it brings. Yes, you are potentially missing out on some of the security fixes of 7.4, but the ones that are included in there aren't vast, from what I could see at least now at the time of recording. And right now, aside from the storage efficiency mode, which again, locking behind their own drives and later systems, not a great look, Synology. With the exception of that, there's not much else in DSM 7.4 that I think is for everyone. And I think maybe towards the end of the year, we'll start to see more tangible benefits. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, I'll link to the article below. Thanks again to Dan for his help on the DSM 7.4 third-party drive utilization on the systems. And of course, if you are watching this, Dave Russell, I'm pretty sure I know what you're cooking up there in the background, and we all look forward to seeing you do it. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.